If you were watching this video, there was a very large chance that you would have spent some of your formative years being entertained by the films, both features and shorts, of PIXAR Studios. Their ability to captivate audiences, both young and old alike, with their groundbreaking animation, witty humour, and heartfelt moments that pluck at the heartstrings, have made the studio a household name, having released multiple million-dollar movies and franchises, as well as receiving multiple awards. However, it could be argued that in recent years, PIXAR has not been living up to the high standards that they set themselves with their previous work. This brought me to question, when did PIXAR reach its peak? And from the research I did, the answer is, unfortunately, hard to say, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. But if we're going to start something, we might as well start from the beginning. The origins of PIXAR. Now, PIXAR started technically in 1979 as part of the Lucasfilm computer division. It was known then as the Graphics Group before its spin-off as a corporation happened in 1986, with funding from Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, who became its majority shareholder until the end of his life. Disney announced its acquisition of PIXAR in January of 2006, bringing them in to start the mega corporation that they are to this day. PIXAR was the starting block of that. PIXAR is best known for, of course, its feature films, but also its short films as well. Now, between the years of 1995 and 2024, PIXAR has produced 28 feature films, mostly helmed by 5 key people, being John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Pete Docter, Andrew Stanton, and Lee Unrich. This started with Toy Story in 1995, which made history as the first fully computer-animated feature film of its kind. And the most recent film, of course, was Inside Out 2, which came out this year. The studio has also produced many short films that are still beloved to this day. This includes stuff like Luxo Jr., Bounding, For the Birds, Jack Jack Attack, Bow, Lifted, and many, many more. As of this year, its feature films have earned over $16 billion at the worldwide box office, with an average gross of $546.9 million per film, which is a hell of a lot more than most studios make. Toy Story 3, Finding Dory, The Incredibles 2, Toy Story 4, and Inside Out 2 have all grossed over $1 billion at the box office and are among the 50 highest grossing films of all time. Moreover, 15 of Pixar's films are in the 50 highest grossing animated films of all time. This is how big Pixar is in the animated section of the film industry. But it's not all about box office and money, because Pixar has also earned 23 Academy Awards, 10 Golden Globe Awards, and 11 Grammy Awards, along with numerous other awards and acknowledgements for its films, feature and short. And since its inauguration in 2001, 11 Pixar films have won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, which includes Finding Nemo in 2003, The Incredibles in 2004, Ratatouille in 2007, WALL-E in 2008, Up in 2009, the aforementioned Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4 in 2010 and 2019 respectively, Brave in 2012, Inside Out in 2015, Coco in 2017, and Soul in 2020. Toy Story 3 and Up were also nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, respectively, as well. But you don't get that successful and popular overnight. So what did the early films of Pixar have that made the studio into what it is today? Let's start at the beginning. The early years of Pixar films, from 1995 to 2001. And in this section, they released Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, and Monsters, Inc. Now, these are definitely the films that, although still very much beloved today, have the most wear and tear on them, you could say. These are the ones that don't look as good as perhaps some of the others, perhaps because it was very early in the time of Pixar and they hadn't quite mastered everything that you could do with the technology they were working with. Just for example, in all of these films, if you ever see a human being in them. They don't look quite right, which is why these first 4 films focused on other types of characters that weren't humans but were sort of human-like. So, toys, insects, and small animals, monsters. These things you could put character and human-like features to, but they didn't have to be human themselves, therefore making them easier to animate for Pixar. Now, this is very early on to say that Pixar has peaked here. I'm sure no, it wasn't here with the next films that are coming up, but this is a very good starting block for Pixar to elaborate on. Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc. All great films, all did pretty decently well at the box office. I know Toy Story 2 is one of my favourites, and Monsters Inc. gets talked about a hell of a whole lot. And I mean, two out of the 4 got sequels. I mean, one of them is a sequel in itself, Toy Story 2. It made a sequel right off the back. That is the franchise player that they are showing out right now. And Monsters Inc., of course, got a sequel eventually down the line. A Bug's Life, we are unfortunately still waiting for A Bug's Life 2. Unfortunately, it may never happen, but we shall wait and see. But the early years showed that Pixar had potential, and Pixar could go the long yards and show what their animation could truly do to take over the animated industry. And that is exactly what they did in their next era, which we are going to call the GOAT era. Now, if you doubt the credentials of the GOAT era, which was from 2003 to 2010, let me list you off the films that Pixar released during this time. Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Cars, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Up, and Toy Story 3. There is no denying that this era of Pixar is banger after banger after banger. Starting off with Finding Nemo, which made bank at the box office, over $800 million, the closest that they had got at that point to making $1 billion. Won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, the first time a Pixar film had ever done that. The Incredibles is a very beloved franchise and film, especially for me, who just wants Marvel to make a Fantastic Four film right, and constantly wants to tell them that, look at The Incredibles, just do that. That's a perfect Fantastic Four film. Cars has its fans, and people who are on the internet now have grown up with Cars, and it's become a bit of a staple in the internet world. Sure, later films are going to make it seem less good, but the first Cars is whimsical and fun. Ratatouille, very much beloved by the music in it and the art in it. Setting it in France. Again, it's only the second film that has had like proper good looking humans, The Incredibles being the first one. And then after Ratatouille, you get WALL-E, an adorable little robot going on a wonderful journey, and it's so heartbreaking at the end. This era really showed and hallmarked all the key features of what you remember of Pixar. It's funny, it's whimsical, it's got a cartoony-like thing that's going on, a family mess-up, a heartbreaking thing. That is Pixar to a T, and WALL-E perfectly exemplifies that. And then they capped off the decade with quite possibly 2 of my favourite films of all time. And recently I did a rewatch of Pixar films, and I watched these 2 films in the same day. It's Up and Toy Story 3, which, if you don't know, was probably a mistake to do in one day, because after it, I was a mess. But Up is so poignant and beautiful and has you in tears in the first 10 minutes. That is a powerful, powerful film if it can do that to you. And the rest of the film is also incredible And Toy Story 3, as someone who believes in trilogies, was such a beautiful way to cap off the trilogy and the saga of them. Andy's grown up and they have to move on with their lives, and what does that look like? What do they do with themselves? And it went in such an interesting way, and I thought it was just a perfect way to finish it off. And I cry more at Toy Story 3 than I do at Up, because it hits me so hard, and I grew up a lot with Toy Story 3. I mean, I'm gonna put it. I don't hate Toy Story 4. I just feel you could have finished it here. So that brings into question: did Pixar peak here? Was it with Toy Story 3 that they peaked and hit their higher echelon of pure quality? Because Toy Story 3 won all the awards it needed to win, made over $1 billion at the box office, which I believe was the first time they'd ever done that. So, was it all going to be downhill from there? They reached the top. There are a few in the next era that you could say, no, there's still even better to come. But you've got to admit that capping it off with their franchise player as the final thing, that's quite striking an end, you would say. And as we all know, these are the films in this era that most people come back to and say, oh, that's my favourite Pixar film. Or Up, that's my favourite Pixar film. Ratatouille, that's my favourite Pixar film. The Incredibles, that's my favourite Pixar film. I know that because these are the films that I grew up with as a Pixar fan. I had these films, and this was it for me, and then everything else came on afterward. So for me, this is where Pixar peaked. But it's not about my opinion. This is about scientifically finding out what truly is the peak of Pixar. And I feel like we'll find out even more intimately when we look at the next era, which I am going to dub the sequel era. Now, the sequel era took place between the years 2011 and 2019. And you could tell that some of their main guys had been whisked away to somewhere else, probably to Walt Disney Animation Studios, who were trying to set up their new animation division with 3D animation, which Pixar helped to pave the way for, which would bring us Tangled, Frozen, Moana, Raya and the Last Dragon, and all that jazz, and has carved into what the Disney animated films that you see today. And Pixar helped set that up, and in doing so, it took away some of their talent, and perhaps that is why this era is not as beloved as the era that came before. The sequel era, 2011 to 2019, you get Cars 2, Brave, Monsters University, Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, Finding Dory, Cars 3, Coco, Incredibles 2, and Toy Story 4. And this starts what I believe is a very up-down trajectory for Pixar. Because before this, it was pretty much just on an up and up for Pixar. Every film just seemed to be kept getting better and better and better. The animation got better, the storytelling got better, the awards, the money, it all got better for Pixar. And this is when you could say Pixar starts to stagnate and just become another animation film studio and loses what is special about it. Not quite, but it looks like it might be losing it. Cars 2 is a perfect example. Not doing very well at the box office, not receiving any awards, I don't think, and just sort of losing what the original was about and not wanting to be what the original was and not being what the fans wanted at the end of the day. And I should know it's not my cup of tea, Cars 2. I know there are a lot of people out there that do really like Cars 2, but the facts show that this wasn't good for Pixar. But like the up-down trajectory would suggest, the next film shows you that they still have it with Brave. And Brave's an odd one, because during the same time, Disney Animated Studios released Wreck-It Ralph. And I think we can all agree Wreck-It Ralph feels more like a Pixar film, and Brave feels more like a Disney film. So it's sort of like they've just swapped people around, but not swapped ideas. It was very odd, but Brave nonetheless is a Pixar film, and that film is beautiful. It looks gorgeous. They took so long to try and get the curly hair of Merida working perfectly, and it does work perfectly, and it's a beautiful story, and it's beautifully told, and I love Scotland and all that jazz. However, at this point they are sort of trying to release 2 films in the same year, so maybe there is a bit of tiredness going on. There's a bit of, oh, we just need to pump these out. Disney's backing us now. They just want more content, more content, more content. Which brings us back to the idea of maybe Pixar peaked in 2006 when they were still just an independent studio that was just using Disney for distribution and not wholly owned by them. Maybe that's when they peaked, and then they started to get more corporate and they became less of themselves. But nevertheless, this is where they are at now, and after Brave came Monsters University, which isn't terrible. It's actually quite good. I quite like Monsters University, but it's not as good as Monsters Inc. And I think at this point, people are starting to see a pattern forming. It's not concrete yet, but over the next few movies, maybe we will start to see a pattern. But the next film, Pixar, they strike back because they release Inside Out. And Inside Out is undoubtedly, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies ever made. And it's definitely a film that should be taught in schools, because Inside Out is so beautiful in, one, its animation style, how that animation is used to tell a story, and also its messaging to kids. That is the most important thing, in that it is okay to show more than one emotion. It's okay to be sad, angry, scared, happy, disgusted, alone. It's all okay to show these feelings because it's what makes you human. And that is an important message for children to learn. It's an important message for teenagers to learn. Important message for adults to learn. Inside Out, in my opinion, is one of the most important films ever made. So, at this point, Pixar can do no wrong. They are the higher echelon, in my opinion. That's why I will never hate Pixar, because they were able to make this movie. So I could say Pixar has peaked for me here. You could say Pixar peaked here in general. But there are some more great films coming. Some more stats that could prove that wrong. The next film is not one of them, because it's The Good Dinosaur. And it's a bit unfortunate with The Good Dinosaur. It doesn't get the publicity that maybe it sort of deserves. It kind of fades out of existence. If people were to ask me to recite every Pixar film that I knew, I could probably name you all of them, except probably The Good Dinosaur. Not now, because I've done a lot of research on this topic and this studio, so I know them like the back of my hand now. It's a bit of a sickness I have now. But before that, I think I would have forgotten a few, and The Good Dinosaur would definitely have been one of them. I hadn't watched it until recently. It's not as bad as I've been told, but it went back to a sort of old Disney animated studio idea of everything's extremely sad, and at the end everything's still sad, but it's only slightly less sad. And the idea of it didn't fully work for me, and it doesn't have the same whimsicalness as some of the others, I feel. And the animation style, while it looks great, it doesn't pop, it doesn't whiz, it's not incredible to the senses. It's not a incredible sight to behold. It's just very nicely animated, and I think that's what let The Good Dinosaur down, because it didn't do anything different. If you go back to the GOAT era, between 03 and 2010, all the films are doing something different with the animation, despite them being from the same computer animated style. Finding Nemo gave you realistic looking fish swimming and water animation. The Incredibles gave actually good looking human designs and animation, especially with the hair. Cars animated cars in real life. Ratatouille made a talking rat look conceivably human, and the human dynamics have look even better. Wall-E made robots look fun and whimsical with character. Up put a lot of balloons on top of a house and made an old man look very sad and then very happy, and then tore your heartstrings out. And Toy Story 3 gave you the idea of Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 3, and Toy Story 2, and made Toy Story 3, updated it to the animation style that they had now, and brought it into the modern day. And the sequel era so far have all looked nicely animated, haven't added much else bar from the few outliers that I have already mentioned. But again, it's a very stop-start era for this, and after Good Dinosaur, I think in the same year also, came Finding Dory. And again, Finding Dory is one that I also forget and have only seen recently. Same for the next one. And it's actually very genuinely good. It is a good sequel, and there's not much more I can say about it. It's got all the necessary things that you'd want a Pixar film to have, and they remembered it. Cars 3 that came afterwards, again, lost traction, because I think people had already been burnt on the Cars trilogy, because Cars 2 people didn't enjoy, which is why no one saw Cars 3, despite the fact Cars 3 went back to basics, went back to what the second one should have been about, which is what the first one was about. Cars racing and not convoluting it with a world where everything is run by cars, which makes you think more about the world and questioning it, so it makes the films not seem as good. Anyway, Cars 3 was a welcome change. It looks like maybe near the end of this era, Pixar are picking back up. They're getting back on form in more ways than one. But also what it did show with The Good Dinosaur is that they don't trust themselves to make anything new, which is why I call this the sequel era. Because the ones that only seem to do well are the sequels. Which is why they went to Finding Dory, they went to Cars 3, they went to Monsters University, and eventually, after Coco, which is excellent and won a lot of awards and did a lot of animated stuff, they start to go in a saga of, we'll do a new thing, we'll do an old thing revamped, we'll do a new thing, we'll do an old thing revamped. And after Coco, they had 2 sequels in a row. 2 very much wanted sequels, but could almost say unnecessary sequels. Because 1 year after the other, in 2018, they released in The Incredibles 2. I was very excited for it. Incredibles is my favourite Pixar film. I'd waited a long time to find out what was going to happen to the Underminer. I was disappointed. But I still overall enjoyed Incredibles 2. And most people would agree with me because it made over $1 billion. Which is what happens when you wait. Hollywood. And Toy Story 4 came out a year after and also made $1 billion. But yet again, this was also taking into account that cinema was in a boom period at that point. I mean, in 2019 alone, there was so many things making $1 billion that it was scary and it was unfortunate when COVID hit because cinema seemed to be on a bit of a roll. But again, this end of the sequel era could also be argued where it has peaked here. It's made $2 billion movies, one after the other. They've won awards. Did Pixar peak here? Would you say they've peaked here? I would tend to agree with this one, considering what happens next in our final era that Pixar are currently in, which is aptly named the Disney Plus era, which started in 2019, when, oddly, Disney Plus debuted near the end of the year, and March of next year, of the year after, for us in the UK. Now, this era, at the moment, includes Onward, Soul, Luca, Turning Red, Lightyear, Elemental, and Inside Out 2. Now, Onward, the first one, was released in 2020. It came out in February, I believe, and again didn't perform well at the box office. I thought it was pretty good, but I think it was hampered by COVID hitting. Maybe it could have done a bit better, but nevertheless it didn't do that well. And this made me thought, Disney was under new ownership now. I think at this point it was run by someone whose name I forget, who wasn't a fan of animation for some reason. Why would you put someone who wasn't a fan of animation in charge of Disney? But nevertheless, this is what happened. This is what caused, alongside COVID, this is what caused the next few films, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, to be released straight onto streaming, and only recently this year getting theatrical releases, which, I mean, come on now. And I mean, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red are some of the best that Pixar has offered recently. They told different stories, they looked fun and whimsical, and were wholly about something. And instead of releasing Luca and Turning Red into theatres, they decided to release yet another film that is embedded in a franchise, their biggest franchise, Toy Story, with Lightyear, which is a live action retelling, but still animated, of the Buzz Lightyear story. I don't like this one. It's a fun idea for Buzz Lightyear to get his own film. I liked Chris Evans as Buzz. I have nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of things in the story that I do have problems with. For example, he's Buzz Lightyear, he's a space ranger. Why is he not going on adventures in space? Why is he just stuck on the one planet? Just time hopping his way through the planet. It looks like a dark and gritty reboot. It's no one's favourite film. It's no child's favourite film. If I was Andy, this would not make me want to buy the toy. This is a throwaway film, in my opinion. So, that's what gets me about Lightyear. But because of that, that's the only one that came out into cinemas. Maybe Pixar thought, maybe Disney thought, oh, we just need to do franchise things. We don't care about ones with actual innovation and imagination. Let's throw out just another franchise thing. This wasn't helped by the fact that the next film, Elemental, which was a different thing, initially didn't do that well at the box office. Luckily, Pixar and Disney kept it out in cinemas. It grew and grew and eventually made quite a bit of money eventually. And of course, because that didn't do as well as they were hoping, they went back on Old Faithful and went back to a bona fide certified name that they could use again, which was Inside Out 2 this time. Now, I'm not taking away from Inside Out 2. Of course, it's an incredible film, and I would love to watch it again and again and again. But it shows that Pixar perhaps is running out of ideas. It's certainly running out of staff, especially if the rumours are true, if they're working them that harshly and not paying them as nearly as well as they should be. But the ones coming soon, we've got a new idea with Elio, and Toy Story 5 is in the works. Who knows how these are going to turn out. But Pixar definitely hasn't peaked in this era. I definitely feel it's further back than this. They definitely peaked before this, because this era is not their finest work. But perhaps it is still to come. Perhaps they still haven't peaked. But what this comes down to, and what is affecting me as well, is the idea of nostalgia, of rose-tinted glasses, of kids who have now grown up and are most prominent within the internet, are more opinionated as they have adult views on things about recent releases. So they're going to be more critical about the recent stuff. They're going to be more critical about Inside Out 2 and Elemental and Turning Red and Lightyear, like I am, because I'm getting older and I'm losing my whimsicalness. But never lose your whimsicalness, kids. And we want things to go back to the way they were in what I've been calling the GOAT era, which is, I only call it that because that's the era where I most grew up watching Pixar films, because I was a child. And to some extent in the sequel era as well, but I was going through an angsty teen phase at the time, which is why I hadn't watched some of them until recently. But in truth, Pixar still makes great films that people love. The most important thing for Pixar is that children are going to see their film, and children definitely are. Children are still obsessed with Pixar. They'll still watch the shorts they do. They'll still watch the films on Disney Plus or their little short TV shows that they do. People still want to watch Pixar, and people still like Pixar films. People are still excited when they announce anything. People are going to be excited for Toy Story 5, even though I think opinions have caught up with Toy Story 4 and said, was that really necessary? But Pixar still makes great films that people love. But the audience that is most prominent has changed. But that doesn't matter to Pixar, because all they need to do is impress children. And hopefully the audience laugh at an adult joke from time to time. So, if anyone from Pixar watches this, keep doing what you're doing. Because I want Pixar films for the rest of my life. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who watched this video. If you liked it, it went a bit tangenty. I'm trying something different with this, more of a video essay kind of thing, something to listen to, put on the background. But if you liked it and want to see more, leave a comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and push the bell notification so you never miss any of these videos on As Yet Untitles. Feel free to listen to the podcast I have with my friend Robert called Magic at the Movies, and of course all of my 1-minute film reviews that I have on YouTube Shorts. And that is everything, everyone. Leave a comment if you want to tell me what your favourite Pixar film is and where you think Pixar peaked. And I will see you all in the next one.